Okay, now we're now in part two of the message. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Like I say again, it's going to probably be about maybe about four parts, maybe even six parts to it because it covers so many different chapters in Genesis. It's going to cover chapter 37 and then chapters 39 through 45 on the story of Joseph. So we left off, we were talking about the brothers that had they was plotting on Joseph. And so now Joseph came up to his brothers. I'm going to start at verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in, and they sat down to eat their meal. They looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. The camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. Okay. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. Okay, so now we see that these brothers, now we're getting into where they done plotted, done sold their brother into slavery, human trafficking way back in the beginning of time. They snatched off his robe, as we know that they wanted to plot and say that an animal killed him. So they took all this off of their young brother and threw him in and then sold him to the Ishmaelites. Now, when we get down into it, the Ishmaelites, they are descendants of Ishmael. And if y'all remember, Ishmael and Isaac, the sons of Abraham, Ishmael is the son and the progenitor, the father of the Arab nations. And we know the hostility that occurred between the Ishmaelites and the sons of Isaac. And again, we know that even today, I think a lot of them even fighting today don't even understand that a lot of that battling between the Arab nations and the Jewish nations it's a battle. It's a spiritual thing. I think that has gotten so far and it turned into politics and everything else. But this thing goes all the way back to biblical time. But anyway, here are these brothers even sold their brother into slavery. They hated him so much that then they're trying to get word. One minute they making comments that, well, we don't want to have his blood on our hands, so let's not kill him, but let's give him to the Ishmaelites. So they still sold their brother to the enemy. They sold him to a group of people that's hostile to their own people. So it don't tell him what um, Joseph would have endured going through being sold over into another ethnicity of people that didn't care for them. It's almost like we seeing what's going on today when the nations, the Jewish nations and the Palestinian nation, the battle that's going on. They're having the hostages. Sometimes we hear about some beheadings, and then we hear about things on the end of the Israel, the Jews. We hear about different things with the Jews and the battles that they're having and all these kind of things. And so a lot of times things can just get crazy. But yet they sold their brother into slavery. Okay. So now it says here in 29, when Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. That's a sign of exclamation of disgust and I don't can't think of the right word, but just shock. I want to say shock. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't here. Where can I turn now?" So Reuben really wanted to kind of get him out of there and take him back, save him. But when he came back to the well, he realized his brother was already gone. So you see, sometimes people will go along with the plans of the plotters and things like this, and those people that's plotting have even a harsher, something in mind that you didn't even think about. It's like these people that commit murder. Sometimes there are people that are going out to commit a robbery or something like that, and somebody in the bunch wind up killing somebody, which they wasn't expecting. And now they're doing life, as being an accessory or accomplice to a murder. So you see, Reuben in this mess here was at least going to try to take his brother back, but he wasn't there. Verse 31, then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, we found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe. And it's something, say your son robe. Didn't even say Joseph. He recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept. Now look at this here. These boys are so got so much hatred for Joseph. They're letting their father suffer. Their dad, suffering. Even it says all the sons and daughters came to comfort him. So he must have been really, really hurt. And it goes to show you how far sometimes people don't even care about your feelings. They'll lie and do anything to better themselves and allow you to be hurt and harmed in their own little plots like this. So this thing had Israel so hurt, that he said that, I'm gonna take this to my grave. This hurt gonna go with me to my grave. Not even knowing if they could have killed their father would have died of stress to the heart or anything behind it. So I want you to understand how evil a person can be. Okay. But yet again, God is in all this with Joseph. So again, people don't care, they don't care about you. They'll lie and do all that thing. We got these human traffickers today. And I want to pray, well, let's just pray that God bust these rings up. These sex traffickers, human traffickers, whatever it is out there, these undercover things, we just pray God that he root them out. God knows it all. God knows the way it starts. People in positions or wherever it may be that's behind all of this stuff. And we just pray God bust it all up. Okay. But in verse 36, it says, meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Joseph was being sold, and he wound up in Pharaoh's house of royalty. So look at God. So instead of just being sold somewhere, you know, with deplorable conditions, he wound up being sold to one of Pharaoh's officials, who the captain of the guard, who had him. And so even in this time of trial, look at God. God's still working. So sometimes we can be in situations and God still be working in us and through us. And even in these ordeals, Daniel in captivity throughout his life, but yet God still using him miraculously in captivity. They even gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, which basically says something to the fact that the gods are with you. So even though they didn't believe in the God of the Bible, they knew that Daniel had some supernatural. It had to be some supernatural force that was with him to, to do the things that he did. Okay, so God is here with them, and so we know that sometimes we can have trial, we can have tribulations, and there's going to be some time that we hurt. And it brings me back to the scripture in Romans that said, and we know that all things work together for the good to them that love God and to them who are called according to His purpose. That's Romans 8:28. And so God, we know everything, some kind of way, all this going to work out. So it don't matter. Sometimes we may cry. Sometimes we may even lose our faith and confidence that this thing ain't going to work out, but God will work it out. And one scripture that I always look back to is in Matthew 27:46. It says, and about the ninth hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And Jesus was hurt, he was in anguish, and the human side screamed out, God, why have you forsaken me? Christ knew that God never left him, but these things are written to let us know that there's some times when the human side of us can take over, and it can cause us to even question God. And I thank God that He allows certain things to be written. People can look at this and say, well, was Jesus failing at the cross? No, the human. And that's what the Bible tells us. We got a high priest that can't be touched. God knows what we've been through. He knows the infirmities and things that we went through. Jesus knows that, and that's why He's our mediator, and He can be there to deliver us. He can say, I know what you've been through. I felt what you felt. Okay. And so it's important to know that Joseph, even Jesus was crying out in a different language, Aramaic, when he was speaking out at this time. He did it in the Aramaic language, So we just don't know the anguish of things that can happen. Okay. Okay, let's look at chapter 39 now. Genesis chapter 39. And it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes, and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put from the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So let's look at here. Here's this man now, um, sold into slavery, and now he put in the Egyptian house. And then look at the favor. God still working with him. God still working in his life. That even in this adversity, God could have stepped in and wiped out the brothers and stopped all this from occurring, but God still everything working together for the good. Joseph not understanding. We don't read where God speaking to him, telling him, hang in there, none of this. Joseph just holding on to his faith. So, and again, he's being incarcerated for something he didn't even do. This is something he didn't even do, falsely accused, and going through all of this in life. And because he's taking a stand for God, he's suffering. So, that he just, they were amazing. And again, like I talk about Daniel, they were amazed at how God was using him in his life. And then this what it was with Pharaoh, with Potiphar. Man, anything this guy touches is success. He may not be Potiphar, may not be confessing God, in this sense here, but they like what God was doing in Joseph's life. So even us as being saved, sometimes the worst of people, we can find favor with them, or the worst of bosses, because of how we live our life with God. So let's keep that in mind. We can be on a job that we may not even really want to be on. We just there for the money, for the flexible hours, the benefits, or whatever it may be. But God can be using us there for a reason. It can be because of the salvation of an individual or people, or whatever it may be, something that we're going to do in the future. So let's keep that in mind, that wherever we are, we content, but that doesn't mean we have to accept where we are, but that we knowing that these things are going to make us, everything working together for the good. Some of us have been hired on jobs that we shouldn't have got because of our records, or because we didn't have the qualifications or the credit to get on the job. Y'all know situations. We know the testimonies that we've read and heard of saints that go through this and wind up staying on these jobs a long time, and because of the grace of God that touched somebody's heart to give them a chance. There are many men and women that should have been locked up now doing life in prison, that God had mercy on the judges and the prosecuting attorneys and things of that nature. Excuse me. So God can do anything he chooses, and he can touch people's hearts. Okay, let's look at we're going to go into verse 7. I say, now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. Okay. With But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. So here he is now, he in his house here now. And the Bible first, it starts out telling us Joseph was well built and handsome. For all y'all that like Martin Lawrence, Martin used to use the term, you got it going on. So we know here that we can see clearly here, Joseph, it says he was well built. And I know we're using the international version of this scripture, but Joseph was well built. He was desirous. It could have been his knowledge, his skill, and the anointing that God was on his life, including He was a nice looking guy and well built, so he had a nice physique. But it was enough that Miss Pharaoh had her eyes set on him. Okay. So Joseph, he began to tell her, look, I can go anywhere I want, anything in here. I don't have no problem with except except you. My hands is supposed to be off of you. I can't touch you. I can go here. I can eat where I want to. I can go here and go here in the house. And he's trying to tell her, but Miss Pharaoh don't care about that. Her mindset is on one thing. So now here's a man now. Now he's getting into another area, and I'm sure that the pharaohs, and I think we all know the pharaohs and those kings like that, they always took women that was what we would call the cream of the crop, the best of the best looking and everything. So I'm sure it was clear Miss Pharaoh was not a bad looking woman. And y'all know how we look at the statues, the Egyptian artifacts today, and we see the artifacts and the images of the women that they had. Not a lot of bony women. They were thick, healthy type women, if I can say it that way. That when we look at all the artifacts that we have, but yet here's Joseph like, no, I'm not getting into that. It's just like in our day now. You know, we looking at, in our day, you can see anywhere online now that thick is in. Thick is in. The thicker you are, the sexier you are, the thinner your clothes are, the shorter your clothes are. So that's the thing. But here is this woman here. She want Pharaoh. I mean, excuse me. She want Joseph, and she was blunt and she was right to the point. She told him, "Come and sleep with me." you know, she was in her house, and that's what she was telling him what she wanted. But Joseph, again, he was just maintaining his integrity to his boss and to God, and he wasn't going to do it. But yet it says there that she spoke to him day after day, so she was just constantly flirting with him day after day, you know. And so it's amazing. The Pharaoh was out. Pharaoh had so much trust in Joseph that he allowed Joseph to stay in his house. Now a lot of men wouldn't do that today, but this man was such an honorable man. He had such a reputation that Pharaoh didn't even have a problem with him staying in his house when he wasn't there. You know, so I had a note here about that makes me go back to Adam and Eve. Well, one thing about evil communication corrupt good manners. That's 1 Corinthians 15:33. And how the serpent even starts speaking this message to Eve, deceiving Eve, telling her all these things, filling her head with all this deception, but was making it look good. And what happened? Sin came into the world. So, we have to be careful. We have to be careful about who we around and what we allow to go in our spirit. All this flirtation that Miss Pharaoh was doing, Joseph wasn't giving in. The Bible was saying he wasn't giving in to it, but she was still coming at him. And sometimes we experience that today, people that, and sometimes it can be innocent. Now, in this case, it wasn't. Some people just may not know you're involved or things like that. But here, Miss Pharaoh knew she was wrong, but she was again hitting on Joseph. Okay. Again, looking at this, let's look at this. Think about something with all the Tubi movies today. We see Tubi is full of these movies that filled with this drama, with this cheating and all of these infidelities and these secret lovers, secret affairs, and things like that in the household. So it's like this thing here is now beginning to be popular. But this is what was going on with Miss Pharaoh. Okay. Then it says here in verse 11, one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She called him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had ran out of the house, she called the household servants. "Look," she said unto him, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." Now she's lying on him. She's telling a lie on him. And how many men and even sometimes women have been accused of rape and all kind of things like that innocently? How many are in jail behind something like this here? She she caught him by his cloak, which is his clothing, and she had a piece of it in the hand that it ripped, and was telling a lie on Joseph. She was using something to bring him down. Just like y'all know, years ago we had the scandal with one of our presidents and the dress and things like this here. again, getting back into this here, Miss Pharaoh yelling, basically screaming for help, rape. That he tried to, that Joseph tried to rape her, and it cost Joseph a lot. So sometimes we got to understand that. See, what seemed maybe fun and nice, and I'm not saying Joseph, but just in our lives, people flirting with us, knowing they have no business doing it, and sending all kind of flirty texts, sexual texts, memes, and phone conversations and things like this. If you're not careful, these things can cause your life of misery. People wind up with STDs, loss of life, loss of families and relationships, and all kind of things. Children born as what the world calls illegitimate, and things like this, born out of wedlock, all behind a lot of things, and a lot of life, and a lot of misery in life, that occurs because something that may seem fun, and knowing, and I'm talking now to our saints of God. We know certain things we shouldn't be entering into, certain sites, social media, certain web pages, certain things we just shouldn't have on our pages, and certain things we shouldn't be engaging in. So let's just keep that in mind, that in the end, all that may have looked good because Joseph took a stand, it cost him everything he had. So her lying on him and doing all of this here. So now the devil doesn't care about you, me, or anybody. The devil and the demonic forces will use any and everybody they can to, to bring us down. Okay. Verse 16 says she kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. That Hebrew slave that you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. And so now she's lying on him. She's lying. And now she done kept this little piece of this cloth until to the master get home and say, look what he did. And then again, here we go now talking about the ethnicity again. This Hebrew. This Hebrew you brought. It makes you think about, in life, all of the African Americans that over the years that been in prison throughout the 60s and lied on, accused of raping Caucasian women and things like this, and Emmett Till, and a lot of these things here. We can see the demons working throughout the ages, and the devil don't care about age, about anything. The demonic forces don't care, and that's some things that we have to understand. That the devil influenced people to have this kind of hatred in their heart. And the sad part about all this is so many of those folks now that whoever didn't confess Jesus Christ for real in their life, they're in hell. They're in hell now. That same hatred have passed on to generations, and that's what it is. So it's a dangerous thing. So verse 19, it says, when his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me, he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So, excuse me. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Just look at God again. Look at the power of God again on his life. Everywhere this man is going, people are trusting him so much to just like, you just got free reign. It's not like, here he is now locked up and accused of something, and he still got free reign to do what he want to do. Everyone he come in contact with, God just is doing this thing for him, and God is just leading, and God is working this thing out throughout the whole time, that even the master would do this. You would think that even before he was put in prison, that they would have came and said something like, hey, did you do this? What, are you really guilty of this? Did you do these things here? But no, they just automatically just accused Joseph, didn't ask him any questions, and just locked him up, put him in the lockup. But yet God is with him there the whole time, you know. And it makes me go and think about something here in these situations like this, where, we don't read where they asked Joseph anything to even plead his side of the case. He just was automatically guilty because of who said this about him. And it makes me think about some of these shows we have on, some of these shows we have on TV, Cheaters and all this. We watch all this stuff and how the people always go after the other person instead of the spouse, the one that know better. They don't even know if these other people know better. So we got to just be careful with some of these things that we do and that we allow in our lives, and and that we engage in, and sometimes not even hearing the whole matter. Like the Bible, like we said in one of in the first part of this series, be swift to hear, slow to speak. So sometimes we need to understand and get an understanding, and not just go to pieces and just go berserk and going crazy on whatever it may be. But here, this is what was happening to Joseph. He's being locked up. Sometimes a lie can cost you your job. Somebody lied on you, and on a good job, may have cost you a relationship a lie. You know, somebody lied on you, told something, and you wound up losing a good spouse. Family have been divided among lies. That's one of the things the Bible tells us God hates. Somebody that sowed discord among the brethren, somebody that's always causing drama or confusion. That's one of the seven main things that God hates. And so, these are some of the things that we have to be careful about. But we don't even read in this whole thing that Joseph was angry. Now, I'm not saying, and I don't believe for one moment that he just took all this in stride and didn't have anything to say or wanted to plead his case, or that it didn't make him mad, because he's human. But yet, throughout this whole thing, God was working in this young man's life. So again, all the way from slavery, sold, family, his brothers did him in. Then he sold to the hostile nations, put up in the Egyptian house in royalty. Then he getting accused of something. Now he in jail there. He'll in the lockup around people not even of his ethnicity. And y'all, we know how the little talk is today about the system. A lot of times you go in, you belong to this group, you belong to that group. But yet here's Joseph being put in the atmosphere, or not even around his own people. He in another whole country, in another foreign country, and he in a lockup in around there, and God still putting him in charge of everybody. And we know that a lot of times, in the system today, a lot of that kind of stuff don't go. You ain't finna come in being placed in certain places and running this and running that. It just ain't gonna happen. But with the favor of God, anything can happen. And in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 7, it says, when a man ways please the Lord, he will make even his enemies to be at peace with him. So God, even through this whole time, Joseph in this nation around his own, not his own people, around a hostile people that's not like him. And yet, even in the midst of all that, God protecting him. God got his hand on his life. God working this thing out. And so I want, it's something that we can, we need to hold on to, and just let's look at the pattern that Joseph had. And again, we're going to be going into other chapters. This is just part two. I'm still going to be going into it. And again, the subject is the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So we're going to eventually get to the part where Joseph was now. Everybody, all, his people going to have to come back to him. He going to have to come, they going to have to come to him and basically eat crow, as we say. So like they say, we're gonna get into it when they turned around and have to come back to him, and he's going to be the salvation for his family and his nation. You know, so they got to now come to a man that's going to be in charge. They didn't even know who he was anymore, because he'd been gone so long. That goes back to the saying, like they say, there ain't no fun when a rabbit have the gun. So let's keep all that in mind when we just in our life, that taking things for granted, taking people for granted. You don't ever know who's who can be the salvation for our life. There's people that donate kidneys for others, people having all kind of things. You just don't know. We just don't know. So these, we just want to just encourage everybody to, let's just keep our eyes focused on God. And we're going to go into part three soon.